On my first day at that company, I could think of only one thing. He's here. No matter how much I tried to convince myself he was just another CEO like so many others, David wasn't just a stranger. He was the man with whom I had shared a night of coincidences and danger months ago, hidden behind a lie that should never have existed. I had promised myself that it would stay buried, a secret memory tucked away in some corner of my mind. After all, what could go wrong? The city was big. Life went on, and I never imagined our paths would cross again. But now, there he was, the same intense gaze, the same firm posture, and me, the new employee at the company he ran. My heart pounded in my chest, each beat like a betrayal of the secret I carried. Would he recognize me? I had worn a mask that night, the cursed mask still tucked at the bottom of my drawer. But some details not even the best disguise could hide. My smile, for instance. He had commented on it, said it was impossible to forget. While filling out forms and pretending to pay attention during the onboarding training, my body was on high alert. Every time the glass door opened, I held my breath, fearing I would see him walk in. I wanted to be invisible, to just do my job, earn my space, and give no reason for anyone to suspect I carried such a dangerous secret. But life has a special talent for irony. At the end of the day, when they took us to meet the executive floor, it was impossible to avoid it. He was there. David. In the flesh, in that flawless suit that seemed made to make anyone uneasy in his presence. And when our eyes met for a second, I swear the floor trembled beneath my feet. The sensation was like being swallowed by an invisible vortex. I wanted to look anywhere else, but couldn't. He looked at me as if he had seen me before, as if some piece of the puzzle in him had just clicked. I forced a slight smile and quickly turned to the colleague beside me, but it was too late. I knew he had noticed. Something. That night, alone in my room, I took the mask from the drawer, the same one I wore that fateful night. I ran my fingers over the fabric as if caressing a scar. I could hear my best friend laughing, remembering how I had agreed to substitute her in that blind date prank. What was supposed to be just an innocent lie had become the most dangerous secret of my life. My dilemma was simple, yet impossible. I had to hide who I had been that night, but every time I remembered the way David looked at me, it seemed my soul was screaming to be recognized, as if part of me wanted him to discover the truth, as if I wanted him to say, "I know who you are." But no, that would be my ruin. I would lose my job, my reputation, maybe even my friendship. So I took a deep breath, put the mask back in the drawer, and promised myself that from that moment on, I would be just Olivia, the exemplary new employee. The rest, I would bury forever. I had no idea that David wasn't the type to leave questions unanswered. He had this energy, controlling, incisive, impossible to ignore. And while I tried to be just another face among dozens, I could already feel the weight of his gaze in every hallway, as if he were just waiting for the right moment to confront me. Funny how life changes when you keep a secret. Every word seems to have a double meaning. Every smile looks suspicious. Every glance seems like a threat. It was like living in a minefield, where one wrong step could blow everything. Up. And I knew that sooner or later, David would ask the question I feared most. But until then, I needed time. I needed to take a deep breath, keep my head high, and convince myself I still had control of the situation. Because deep down, I already knew. It wasn't him who was caught in my web. It was me who was trapped in his. What would you do if you were in my place? Tell the truth on the first day or hide it until the very last second? Comment below. I need to know if I'm not completely crazy. The next morning, I was determined to pretend nothing had happened. I put on my best professional smile, styled my hair in a serious way, and headed to the office as if it were just another ordinary day. But the moment I entered the conference room, I realized destiny was laughing at me. David was already there, sitting at the head of the table, reviewing some documents. The air seemed to shift when he lifted his eyes and saw me. It was quick, but intense enough to send shivers down my spine. He didn't say a word, just tilted his head slightly, like someone studying a puzzle. I smiled politely, sat as far away as possible, and tried not to tremble when our eyes met for the second time. Throughout the meeting, I felt like there was a spotlight on me. Every time I spoke, David watched me with a focus different from the one he gave others. It wasn't just professional interest. There was something hidden behind that calculated gaze, and the more I tried to convince myself it was paranoia, the harder it became to ignore. Finally, when everyone was standing to leave, he spoke to me for the first time. "Your smile. It looks familiar." His voice was low but clear, like a blade slicing through the silence. My whole body froze. For a second, I couldn't respond. I just forced another smile and murmured, "I guess I have a common face." He raised an eyebrow, clearly amused by my attempt to escape. "Maybe, but not every day does someone look at me that way." The tease was so direct my legs almost gave out. I left the room with my heart racing, feeling his gaze glued to my back. It couldn't be a coincidence. He remembered. Maybe not everything, maybe not clearly, but enough to push me to the edge of a meltdown. It was only a matter of time before he asked the question I feared so much. In the hallway, I ran into Luke, my teammate, and the only one who knew the whole truth. He noticed my state immediately. "What happened? You look like you saw a ghost." "It's not a ghost," I replied, swallowing hard. "It's worse, he recognized my smile." Luke's eyes widened and he almost laughed, but he held back when he saw my desperate expression. "Well, get ready, because this game has only just begun." I spent the rest of the day avoiding any direct contact, but it was impossible. David appeared everywhere, in the elevator, in the cafeteria, in the hallway. And there was always that detail, the look. He didn't need to say anything, because his eyes said it all. It was as if he were testing me, waiting for me to give myself away. That night, lying in bed, I closed my eyes and replayed the meeting scene. The way he talked about my smile. It wasn't a casual comment. It was a disguised memory. A memory that could destroy everything I was trying to protect. I knew I needed a plan, but how do you plan when your heart races every time he's near? It was then that it hit me. It wasn't just fear of being discovered. It was the dangerous desire to be seen by him, to be truly recognized. And that mix of fear and desire was exactly what made me vulnerable. I was lost, and for the first time, unsure if I wanted to be found. If it were you, would you hide this secret until the end, or let fate decide? I want to know, because I don't even know if I can keep fighting it anymore. The office felt more suffocating with each passing day. Not because of work overload, but because in every corner, in every hallway, I felt his presence. David didn't need to say, anything. Just the way his eyes lingered on me, as if at any moment he could disarm me with a single word, was enough. I tried to act normally, typing reports, organizing spreadsheets, attending meetings. But the truth was, my heart raced every time I noticed the subtle arch of his brow, as if silently challenging me. During the first few days, I thought I could escape. Avoid direct contact, maintain professionalism, pretend that night never happened. But David seemed to have turned my resistance into a personal game. One morning in the elevator, we were alone. The space felt smaller than it actually was. He was less than 3 feet away, and the faint scent of his cologne made me hold my breath. When the doors closed, I heard his low voice, almost a whisper. "Your smile still owes me some explanations." I froze. I didn't respond. I couldn't. My eyes fixed on the changing floor numbers, as if they were my only salvation. But inside, every syllable of his words burned against my skin. On the next floor, just before leaving, he leaned slightly, letting the heat of his body brush mine. "You can't run forever, Olivia." And then he walked away, leaving me with shaky legs and breath caught in my throat. That phrase echoed for hours. I knew I wasn't ready to face the truth, but I also couldn't deny that part of me wanted to be discovered, wanted him to pull me out of the mask I had created for myself. The next day, I found him in the cafe near the office. I always went. There to breathe a little, to enjoy my coffee in peace. But that day, he was already seated at one of the tables, casually flipping through a newspaper. Coincidence? Of course not. As I approached the counter, I felt his gaze on my back. Pretending not to notice was useless. The barista handed me my coffee, and before I could leave, David stood up and blocked my path with a smile that was half challenge, half something deeper. "This place is your refuge, isn't it?" he said, raising an eyebrow. "Interesting. Seems like I like it here too." I tried to smile politely like any employee would with her boss, but the warmth rising in my cheeks betrayed me. He noticed, of course. David always noticed. "Relax," he continued in a low voice. "I'm not telling anyone yet, but you know that one day you'll have to tell me the truth." I left trembling. Not because of the threat, but because deep down, part of me wanted exactly that. To tell him, to confess, to admit that night wasn't just a coincidence. During meetings, his looks were sharp blades. He asked simple questions, but with an intonation that left me unsteady, as if he were testing how far I could endure. In one of those meetings, I noticed my fingers tapping nervously on the table. He watched every gesture, every glance I tried to hide, and when everyone left the room, just the two of us remained, in silence. "You've always been terrible at hiding what you feel," he said without raising his voice. "And now, Olivia, what do you feel when you look at me?" My entire body froze. I wanted to answer coldly, to say I felt nothing, but my throat was dry, and my eyes, well, my eyes had already given everything away. The silence was broken by the sound of the door opening. Someone entered to grab a forgotten document, and I seized the chance to escape, but his voice kept hammering in my mind. That night at home, I stared at the drawer where I kept the blind date mask. That memory haunted me like a ghost. I knew sooner or later I would have to choose, keep running or admit that lie was about to destroy me. Luke, my colleague and accomplice, noticed my state. "You're going to explode if you keep holding this in," he said, laughing ironically, either from anger or in his arms. I rolled my eyes, but deep down I knew he was right. Pretending was becoming harder and harder, and David seemed to have all the patience in the world to corner me little by little, slowly, leaving no chance of escape. One afternoon, while we were reviewing a presentation, our arms accidentally brushed. It was just a second, but that second felt far too long. The heat that ran through my body was uncontrollable, and when I looked at him, I saw in David's eyes something beyond desire. It was a mix of pain, anger, and memory. He took a deep breath, closed his eyes for a moment, and when he looked back at me, the intensity almost made me recoil. "You have no idea what that night cost me." I wanted to ask, but the words were, trapped. How could I, if I didn't even have the courage to admit what I felt? After that day, every encounter between us felt heavier. The office hallways were no longer just paths between rooms. They were arenas of a silent war. Every time he passed too close, my body reacted. Every time his voice grew low and slow, my defenses faltered. And every time he pretended nothing was happening, I felt anger because I knew behind that control, he burned just as much as I did. One night, working late, I noticed he was in the room next door. Light spilled through the crack of the door. Instinctively, I walked over. When I gently pushed the door, I found him leaning over papers, but his eyes were lost in the void. He noticed me, slowly raised his head, and something in his gaze made my heart race. It wasn't just desire, it was a silent plea. "Olivia," he said, almost in a whisper, "why did you leave me waiting that night?" The question I feared the most. I couldn't answer. I just took a deep breath and stepped back, because any word that left my mouth would be too dangerous a confession. I returned to my desk with trembling hands. I knew I was at my limit, and I also knew there was no way to maintain this charade for much longer. And this is where I have to ask you, because even I'm not sure I'll have the courage. Would you reveal the truth, even knowing it could destroy your career and reputation? Or would you keep hiding your feelings, even if it consumed you from the inside? Leave a comment about what you would do in my place, because I'll need that answer before everything explodes. The corporate trip began with the usual nervousness, bags packed, tickets checked, and me trying to maintain the posture of an exemplary employee. But every step reminded me that he was there, breathing the same air, sharing the same space. The hotel was elegant, with quiet corridors and warm lighting that made everything feel more intimate. Every glance we exchanged, even from afar, carried the weight of what we had left in the past. It was impossible to ignore. When we arrived at the room, I realized the atmosphere had been arranged by fate. A storm was forming outside, making any escape impossible. I could hear the rain pounding on the windows, the wind whistling through the hallways, and there David and I were trapped, no way out. He closed the door behind him with a snap, and the silence that followed was so heavy I could almost hear him breathe. Every step he took toward me seemed to measure my own fear. "Olivia," he began, and just that name carried too many memories. The weight of my lie, my escape, our suppressed desire. I swallowed hard, unable to face what he was about to ask. But he didn't wait. "Why did you disappear that night?" The question finally came, direct, intense, cutting through all the defenses I had built so carefully. My whole body froze. I wanted to make something up, to divert, lie again. But this time, there was no escape. the storm. Outside seemed to mirror the one raging inside me, and then he got close, so close I could feel his heat through my skin. The familiar scent, the intense presence, made me lose all rationality. "Olivia, look at me." His voice was urgent, almost a desperate whisper. I lifted my eyes, and in them there was as much pain as desire, an impossible mix to ignore. Without thinking, without logic, I felt my hands rise, touching his face. He closed his eyes at the contact, as if he had been waiting for this reality for a long time. And then it happened. The kiss, strong, urgent, overwhelming, a mixture of anger, longing, desire, and silent confession. Everything we had denied, hidden, and avoided materialized in that instant. My heart raced uncontrollably, my senses mingled between the rain hitting the window and the intensity of his touch. Every movement, every shared breath seemed to dissolve the barrier that had kept the secret safe. When we finally pulled away, gasping, his eyes found mine. He was hurt, confused, but also vulnerable, something I had never seen before, and I knew that whatever happened next, nothing would be the same. We stood there, feeling the world spin around us. The storm continued outside, but inside the room, there was only the two of us, face to face with dangerous truths finally exposed and the kiss that would change everything. Are you enjoying this story? Give it a like and subscribe to the channel. Now, let's continue with the video. The next morning, I woke up before him. The room was silent, the rain finally subsiding outside. I sat on the bed, taking a deep breath, knowing I had to be honest. The mask had fallen, and now only the truth remained. David was still asleep, but I could see the tension on his face, even in the relaxed features of sleep. Every memory from the night before ran through me again, the kiss, the touch, the urgency of words left unspoken. It was time to face everything. I wrote a quick but sincere letter. In it, I explained that I had taken the date to protect my friend and at the same time protect myself. I also expressed that I could no longer hide my feelings, even knowing I might hurt him. I placed the letter on his desk, next to the mask I still kept in my bag, as a metaphor for everything that had been hidden. I knew he would feel every word, that each line would bring pain, but also some relief. The certainty that the truth was finally in the light. When I left the room, David was awake. Silently watching me. No accusations, just eyes trying to understand, trying to decipher my motivations. I took a deep breath, and before turning, he said only, "You've always been complicated, but I understand." I left the hotel with a bittersweet feeling that something had changed forever. I knew our path wouldn't be easy, that there were wounds to heal, but I also knew that for the first time, I no longer had to hide who I was. The weight of the secret was gone, replaced by a new freedom. As I walked to the car, the fine rain began to fall again, but this time it felt comforting, washing away any remaining fear. The story didn't end with a traditional happy ending, but with the promise of honesty, that the future, although uncertain, could now be lived with courage and truth. Have you ever had to tell the truth, even knowing it could hurt someone you love? Leave a heart if you believe that honesty, even when hard, is the way to more genuine relationships. Subscribe for more stories that explore love and the secrets of the heart, and comment, "The truth sets you free," if you also believe in the courage to expose yourself. The corporate trip started with the usual nervousness. Bags packed, tickets checked, and me trying to maintain the posture of an exemplary employee. But every step reminded me that he was there, breathing the same air, sharing the same space. The hotel was elegant, with quiet corridors and warm lighting that made everything feel more intimate. Every glance. We exchanged, even from afar, carried the weight of what we had left in the past. It was impossible to ignore. When we arrived at the room, I realized the atmosphere had been arranged by fate. A storm was forming outside, making any escape impossible. I could hear the rain pounding on the windows, the wind whistling through the hallways. And there, David and I were trapped, no way out. He closed the door behind him with a snap, and the silence that followed was so heavy I could almost hear him. Breathe. Every step he took toward me seemed to measure my own fear. Olivia, he began, and just that name carried too many memories. The weight of my lie, my escape, our suppressed desire. I swallowed hard, unable to face what he was about to ask. But he didn't wait. Why did you disappear that night? The question finally came, direct, intense, cutting through all the defenses I had built so carefully.